I promise. In fact, our next industry leader is Global Head of IoTWorks, HCL Technologies, Internet of Things Business Unit, Head of Engineering Services Business Line at HCL Technologies, focused on high-tech and communications markets, and I should say, just won the Testbed Prize last night at the awards gala. I had to say that, sorry. It's a little embarrassing, I know, but it was worth it. Hundreds of testbed proposals arrived. 10 testbeds were actually being shown in the testbed area, which you still should check out. And won an award last night. It was the Testbed Award, in fact. Currently involved in extending HCL's thought leadership in IoT, creating market space, managing P&L and customer satisfaction across all vertical markets globally. Sukamal Banerjee has been instrumental in establishing HCL's market leadership in engineering services and large partnership agreements. Please welcome Mr. Sukamal Banerjee, Global Head of IoTWorks, HCL Technologies.
Thank you very much. Okay, good morning, everybody. And again, as Dr. Richard Solly said, thanks for sticking around for day 3. And it's wonderful to be talking to all of you and sharing what we at IoTWorks, which is a startup in HCL Technologies. We are about a 100-member team, but with very big ambitions and a very big goal and objective that we are driving. And what I'm talking today is mainly sharing what the team is doing, how they are thinking, and most importantly, trying to make IoT adoption happening. And our focus is enterprises. So you call it industrial IoT, you call it enterprise IoT. Fundamentally, it's about how does IoT adoption happen in global 2,000 companies, and how can we create business value out of it. We strongly believe that at the end of the day, IoT adoption is going to happen because there is business value out of it. It's not going to happen because technology is cool. Technology is cool is going to start the process, but at the end of the day, it's about business value. So my talk today is about that, in kind of sharing some examples with you about how we are thinking, how we are engaging with customers, and where we have actually delivered this business value, or we have created a clear roadmap to that business value. So I don't know where the flicker is. OK. So with that, let's get started. I was here last year as well, and I thought probably it's a good thing, as probably one of those premier industry events focused on IoT and all gathered here, and especially sticking around for day 3. My assumption is you are probably some of the biggest enthusiasts of IoT. Where were we in 2015 and where are we in 2016 as it relates to business value, creation of business value from IoT? If I have to use a simple analogy, in my opinion, 2015, we were at pre-birth stage. We were not born from a business value perspective. A lot of talk was still about technology adoption, technology creation, how can technology change things, but there was not many connections being drawn about why this technology, or what do we do with this technology. So if I have to just represent it with one picture, it was probably in the embryonic stage in terms of what's the business value from IoT. Fast forward 12 months, I think we have made substantial progress. From our own experience, we have seen that when we have been able to connect the dots and talk about how this can generate business value for you in an enterprise, it definitely speeds up things. So again, to extend the analogy, if I have to use another example picture, it's probably the birth has happened of business value. So as an industry enthusiast and as an industry group, we should really celebrate that. And the fact is, I think we are at a stage where we are ready to run, right? I mean, as at least my observation has been, babies don't do crawl, walk, run. They really crawl, run, then they walk, right? So I think we are at that stage where we are seeing clear business benefits which are ready to run. So if I have to simply summarize, it's really business impact from that embryonic stage to ready to run. That's where we are as an industry. And as we take this discussion forward, I think it's very, very important for us to start thinking about how do you create this business value? Where do you start? I mean, about 12, 18 months back, when we went and talked to CXOs at Global 2000 companies, there were two common questions. Where do we start? What do I do with the data? Right? Probably the two most common questions. Nobody asked that question, nobody, or I shouldn't say nobody, but most don't ask that question anymore. And one of the reasons that question doesn't get asked is because organizations such as ours are going and engaging with our customers and focusing on specific aspects of business value and then talking about IoT. So if you take this example of predictive maintenance, which has been a big talk, and of course, there are results which have been clearly delivered over the last 1 year, 2 years, potentially even 3 years. What does that really mean in terms of predictive maintenance? Is it value, or is it an area where value can be generated? There's no question about it. The numbers are there, which you're using for various sources. There is enough potential value that can be generated. But the key question is, how do you actually harness that value? How do you actually make it happen? So one is to implement the technologies around IoT, get the data out, do the analysis, and say, hey, the part is going to fail in so-and-so time frame. That's good, very good, but it's not enough. And that's where we believe that the next step comes in, which is where you start connecting to business value. If you look at any enterprise today, how is business value created in the enterprise? It is through business processes, and in these business processes are embedded very significant systems and applications that have been built for a long period of time. So it's probably not going to be very successful if we create IoT systems in isolation. For you to get the real value out of, let's say, predictive maintenance in the aerospace industry or any other industry, automotive industry, you really have to go back and start linking it to the systems of record. You have to make sure that whether it is the ERP, the systems which are used for central maintenance of records, whether it is the enterprise asset management systems, they are getting linked, and they are where the real business process related actions are being taken in order to drive business value out of predictive maintenance. And that's the journey, and that's when you start connecting these dots. That's when any enterprise and any enterprise owner starts seeing value of what this can drive and what this can deliver. Similar are the examples in other industries. If you take healthcare, for example, we are just taking point examples over here. One of the biggest ones, especially in North America, this data that we are talking about here, the $41 billion per year cost, which is there to the healthcare industry, is fundamentally from patient readmission. With the Affordable Health Care Act, or the Obamacare as it's mostly known as, the fundamental driver to the industry, the providers, the insurers, and hence to the suppliers, which is medical devices and pharmaceutical companies, is about output-based medicine. Fundamentally, you get paid a fixed amount for a given disease. So one of the biggest sources of making sure your offering to the marketplace is being profitable and you can keep your costs low is to avoid patient readmission. And if you have to avoid patient readmission, one of the simplest things, simple from a concept perspective, of course very difficult to implement, is about remote patient monitoring. Now, remote patient monitoring from a technology standpoint, again, is available, right? There are many point solutions which exist by which you can measure somebody's blood sugar levels. You can measure somebody's heartbeat, right? I think there are enough references which have been made to wearables which does point things. But those point things do not scale for the healthcare industry. They are not certified for the healthcare industry. You really have to start integrating them again with where the value in the healthcare industry lies. It is in their electronic patient record systems. It is in their hospital enterprise management systems. So you have to make sure that you are able to get the data from a remote patient monitoring perspective, which is not only just compliant from a safety criticality perspective, but also then taking that over and making sure it gets fully integrated into the business process where the actual business value gets created. So that's just two examples. I can keep going with industry examples, but fundamentally what I wanted to share is that it is very important for us today, especially as system integrators and the business that we are driving, is to stop talking about art of possible and get into the art of delivering. It is very important for us to make sure that we are actually delivering business value. And I'll share some examples. They may not be enterprise-wide business value, but point examples which can actually create very significant impact. And it becomes very important for us to start thinking about and taking outcome-based objectives out of these business values. Similar is the case for any other industry. In energy and utilities, again, this is US data, probably very similar in the rest of the world. Outages. Outages today cost $2 billion, right? So again, if you can, from an IoT perspective, get into active grid management, but active grid management by itself is not going to work unless you can integrate with the SCADA systems which already exist, unless you can integrate with all the systems of records which are being used today to run the business processes, to take decisions, right? The same applies to transportation. One simple example in transportation is simply loss of cargo. Today, the loss of cargo estimated is about $50 billion per year. So for an industry which is operating at 1% to 3% net margin, right, that's a very big number. And even if you just consider the top 10 players in the industry from a transportation logistics perspective, right, if you can start shaving off the losses that they have taken as granted, that I cannot do it, I cannot reduce it anymore with my current processes, right? How can you bring track and trace and start integrating it into their entire process globally to make sure that you can actually drive that business value of bringing loss down? So that is the thought process that we have been driving. It is not about just making sure that we talk the promise of technology, but talk how can that promise of technology translates to business value. And it becomes, yes, ideally you should be talking about it at a macro strategic level, and that is an initiative which should absolutely be taken in an enterprise. But it is at this stage of our evolution, and I think I'm sure we have seen the charts about IoT being at the top of Gartner's hype cycle. It becomes very important for us as the industry to make sure that we demystify the hype and we start delivering business value. And our approach towards that has been to take specific business challenges in industries and in customers and try and solve them with IoT. So here are some examples. All three of these examples are implementations at scale. These are global implementations. The first, actually, a couple of them over here were actually done, or actually started, I would say, when the word IoT was not even in vogue. We used to call it smart connected solutions. And one of them we had called smart parking. The other one we had simply called e-replenishment. So if you look at it, what is it doing? There are all kinds of numbers over there, and I'm happy to spend time with you if you come over to our booth about how those numbers are arrived at. This keynote time is too short to explain. But let me talk about what are we trying to do. With the parking solution that you see over here, what fundamentally we started doing is from a company which was a world leader in doing metering of parking. How many hours have you parked your car? And hence, this is your check, right? We fundamentally have helped them reimagine their business to be in the process of engaging with customers and consumers or drivers directly to let them know where to park, how to park, why to park in a particular place, and what's the best value of parking. That's what we have been able to drive for them. Wherever this implementation has been done, where it was moved from metering to smart parking, they have seen a 30% increase in revenue for those lots, right? That's one example. Second is one of the industrial giants, a global 200 company, where we are working with them on their journey of implementing remote services, where we are bringing the business value of not just delivering what one business unit can do with a customer, and the moment another business unit has to interact with the same company's another business unit, it becomes a different set of processes and systems and a different approach towards remote services or any kind of services for that matter. We are able to bring this all together on one platform and driving this remote services where they can drive additional value add to their customers. Similarly, for one of the printing giants, even though it didn't start that way, as I mentioned, some of these didn't even start as IoT, but fundamentally what we realized is what we have been doing is really IoT. The word came along the way. What we have been doing over there has been about, if you look at their business, it is about making margins out of consumables. They don't make margin by selling a printer. They make margin by selling cartridges and ink. That's where margins are generated. And if their value chain or their business supply chain around margins, which is the cartridges, they do lose visibility on it. They do not have control on it. They don't have control on their profits. They don't have control on their margins. So what we did with them was to create, again, a global visibility system around their enterprise printers, especially their high-end printers, and how you can create a full e-replenishment system, whether they have control or they can create services which they can go and offer directly, and hence make sure it is their cartridges and their inks which is getting consumed. So these are 3 quick examples. There are many more. And how do you make it happen? I think it's very important to understand that it is not a linear process. It is very important to understand it's a iterative process. It is very important for us to understand that you will not get the entire solution on day one. So we have come up with an end-to-end offering leveraging all of HCL's capabilities. So even though IoTWorks is a 100-member team, we are leveraging the capabilities of 110,000 employees of HCL globally across various aspects and bringing them together, and where necessary, even investing on developing those skill sets that do not exist and are important for driving business value for IoT in this cycle of define, build, run. So define is where a lot of the art of possible gets discussed, but also we are tying it very heavily to what's the business outcome we can expect. Second comes build, where multiple aspects get involved, right from the device to the platform to the analytics, and I'm sure as IoT enthusiasts you understand all of that. So I won't go into too much of details, but offering that end-to-end, and essentially, especially for those companies which have what we call dark assets, which are not smart and connected, enabling them to make it happen. And I'll talk about the example which won that award last night as to what I mean by a dark asset. And similarly, run. It's not just important for us to make sure that we have built something and we are getting business value. It's also very important to make sure that we are creating a total cost of ownership for the next 3-5 years, which an enterprise feels comfortable with. The last thing they want is to create an expense bill, which is going to be $500 million or $1 billion on something that they're saving, and do not have a visibility on that on day one. They really need to understand what's my total cost of ownership over the next 3 to 5 years. And hence, it becomes very important to provide a capability to run those systems, platforms, and devices, and manage those devices that have been implemented, and make sure it is being done at a cost point which makes it palatable from an OpEx spending standpoint. So that's what we do. The key point that we try and do and differentiate, and that is where I believe it becomes very important to go back to that point of how do you create sustainable business value, is to make sure that IoT's conversation is not just stuck at this, what you see on the slide right now, which is there's a thing and there is data and you do analytics on that data. That's just the starting point. That does not generate enough of a business value. Business value happens when you close the loop, when you tie it to business processes, you tie it to business systems. More importantly, at the end of the day, till all the predictions of human beings being irrelevant and robots will take over from us and software will take over from us, business is still run by humans. And humans take decision about how to implement a new process or a new system. They either can make it successful or they can make it fail. So it becomes very, very important to make sure that in that change management process, they understand the value of this change. Why should they change, and what value can they expect from this change? So this continuous circle, what we call the innovation value loop, is very, very important for us to make sure that we can continuously drive this conversation with our enterprise customers and engage our enterprise customer for IoT's journey to continue. Otherwise, this will remain POCs and pilots forever. Here are 3 quick examples going forward. Again, what you will see, these are you're not seeing too specific financial calculations over here. And the reason is simple. It's quite possible in the beginning you will not be able to achieve that. It's not clear about how that business value outcome will be driven. But as long as that focus remains, as long as you're bringing methodologies and processes to make sure that you are driving that outcome, right, customers are willing to move forward. A very simple example I'll cover, which is in the mining industry. We have a solution right here that you can come over in our booth and look at, which is the smart helmet. Now, smart helmet can be a cool gadget, but what is the purpose? One of the first things we have done with mining is to use it for what we call blast roll call. So every time a blast happens in a mine, there's a roll call of all workers in the mine, and it can take up to 5 hours, thankfully 5 hours, to complete. With this, we have been able to bring down that process to 5 minutes, right? There are lots of other extendable use cases that can be driven from this process, but this is just one such simple example of what is the business value. And then you can keep on extending with regards to the journey of safety and compliance of your workers in a mine. Similarly, for the aerospace industry, we are working on a case where we are driving down the whole cycle time of testing of airplanes before they hand it over to an airplane, to airlines. So in this process, again, making sure that we are trying to generate those business value and business value drivers about why this investment needs to continue. So this is what was being referred to as the award we won last night as the best solution for test bed. So if you haven't seen it, please do drop in and have a look at the test bed. This is a real world project, but obviously started off as a solution that we thought has value. What is it? Very simple. Surgical kits in medical industry. They are dark assets. Nobody has bothered to track them beyond barcodes. Barcodes is probably the most sophisticated tracking mechanism of surgical kits. Now, why is it not done? Because a surgical kit goes through a very intense sterilization process of very harsh chemicals and very high temperature. Electronics do not survive. So even if somebody has thought about it, they have not figured out how to implement it. So HCL, with its capabilities in engineering, what we have been able to do is create that packaging of how can you have traceability tracking of these devices and down to the individual instruments, right? And make sure that when an operating theater is getting ready for an operation, the data today is 9% of operations in US gets postponed or delayed because the right surgical kit is not available, right? The other data, which is the amount of time which is spent in terms of making sure that the compliance and safety requirements have been met, is also significant. So in order to do this, what hospitals have done is turned around and told their providers that you have to offer this to me as a service. I'm not going to buy this, so these are offered as service. For every operation, the medical devices companies makes a certain amount of money. It's already outcome-based. So how do they do it? They do it because they do not have visibility about where the equipment is. They do not have visibility about whether it's in the sales rep's home, whether it's lying somewhere in the hospital, is it in the warehouse. They don't know whether it has been sterilized, not sterilized. Everything has to be done through a human process. Every step has to be done through a human process. Now, if you have to automate that whole thing, there is a potential saving of $400 million of inventory cost. That is what we are targeting with this particular company and implementing this surgical kit solution. Now, surgical kits are manufactured by 10 companies in the healthcare industry, right? So I'm pretty sure it's a matter of time all of them start adopting this once this goes live. So this is a very simple example of how we are thinking through not just things, not just data, but very importantly, process and people. One of the key aspects of people, which I'll cover in the next slide, this is the example of where we are doing predictive maintenance for an aircraft engine manufacturer. Now, without spending time on predictive maintenance and what does it mean from an aircraft engine manufacturer, the business value is not just knowing that the parts are going to fail. Because today, all aircraft engine manufacturers or probably any other aircraft parts, they already have a maintenance schedule. They already have enough statistical data which tells them that when they expect a certain part to fail. and they already have a proactive maintenance schedule which has been implemented. Now, what is the problem with that? Or what is the improvement you can do with it? Today, it operates in silos. So what that fundamentally means, an airline has to ground an airplane today in order to run that maintenance process, right? And God help if there is an untimely maintenance requirement which has come up. I'm sure all of you have heard that there's a light on in the cockpit before you take off, right? If one of those things happen. So how do you make sure that the right person with the right part, with the right knowledge is available ahead of time? The only way to do it is, again, orchestration of business processes. By orchestrating the systems across the airlines, across the MRO provider, whether it is in-house MRO of the airlines or it is outsourced, it doesn't matter. But fundamentally, it has to be a business process orchestration which finally drives the value. It's not just the algorithms and the statistics which creates the predictive maintenance model. So if you have to actually drive down the aircraft on ground matrix, you have to do it by implementing this business process. The other key aspect comes in over there is people. It's very important to make sure, and I'm sure many of you may have gone through that cycle of ERP implementations. There used to be big budgets which were allocated to a thing called change management. How do you make sure people actually adopt all these changes which are being done? Well, good news is, today probably in IoT world, change management can be driven by a lot of very intelligent and special user experiences that you can create, which creates a behavior, and one of the most common ones is data entry. If you can reduce an operator's or an engineer or a workman's data entry and make it autonomous, or make it autonomous, make it automatic, whatever automation that you can bring in. But fundamentally speaking, can you make his or her life better? And that drives adoption. And that is another big part that we have been focused on, which is what is the user experience for the people on the ground, for them to start adopting these solutions, and not because there's a memo that they have got from central office that they have to use this new process, right? So that's how the adoption process has been driven. Just quickly summarizing what we at HCL are doing and the unique aspects that we bring to the table. As I mentioned, first and foremost, IoT hasn't been new for us. We have been doing smart product and smart services since 2010. We didn't call it IoT, but we have done engagements with industrial pump companies, which suddenly started making sure that they have visibility into their industrial pumps after the whole unfortunate incidents which happened in Japan, where the nuclear reactor melted down because pumps were not operating. It took 2 days or 3 days to figure out the pumps were not working. So simply from that perspective, we have started that journey long time back, at least at the device and connectivity level. We have been able to bring in what we have been doing with regards to platforms and making sure that we make this offering end-to-end and drive that business value cycle for our customers. One of the big aspects which you see on the bottom left is creation of solutions. So our team has invested heavily in creating these solution showcases that you can see in the booth, and there are many more which we could not bring it over here because of lack of footprint. But fundamentally, these are solutions which addresses 4 aspects. We call it FAST. Force, asset, force as in workforce, asset, pretty obvious, site, which is a work site, and transformation, T. So fundamentally, if you're looking at it from a level of complexity, probably some of the easiest use cases in a business starts on the left, or depending on right where you are sitting, and goes to the right. So force is probably some of the easiest use cases to implement, least complexity, to transform, which is probably some of the most complex, right? But again, having that framework and making sure that customers can look at real-world solution and they can see their own assets come to life is a big part of driving that journey. Third aspect, we talked about people. Very, very important to make sure the adoption of IoT for people through user experience is a very key aspect, because it's quite possible that if this experience and people come in the way of adoption of enterprise value from IoT gets in the way, you will have a challenge in terms of scaling up and continuing that journey. So we have another business unit. So these are 2 business units which HCL has formed after 12 years. So we don't create business units just like that. So which focuses on the user experience and design thinking. So we are leveraging them to make sure that when it comes to people and people-related adoption of these solutions, there is clear focus on the fact that it is easy to adopt. There is a benefit for the individual to adopt, and they find it easy to adopt. That becomes a key aspect of making sure that the journey continues and accelerates. Of course, all of you know, IoT is an ecosystem play. We don't believe we can do this on our own. We have been partnering heavily with some of the technology companies that you see over here. And it is not just technology partnerships. We are doing partnerships with strategy firms. We are doing partnerships with industry-specific analysts or experts or SMEs in specific processes. We are partnering with universities and making sure that a lot of what we can drive out of IoT and the benefit we can drive out of IoT is really bringing this ecosystem together and not just trying to do things on our own. So that's pretty much what I had to share. Thank you very much for your patient listening. And we have 55 seconds left. If there's a question, I can answer. Otherwise, we can wind up. No? OK. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.